Thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk, and today we have the incredible Captain Dale Dye on the show today, Marine Corps veteran, actor, technical advisor, writer, speaker. If you have the chance, check out some of the TED Talks with Captain Dale. Amazing. Sir, it's great to have you on here today.
Well, thank you, John. It's good to be with you.
And before we kind of jump into your career, I want to say, growing up and even now with the movies and stuff and watching television, it's always interesting for me when I see a familiar face. And when it comes to movies and television shows, and I grew up watching all Seagal movies, and You're Always Under Siege, and the Band of Brothers stuff, and all these movies. And I was always like, man, he must be really good at wearing a uniform. Like, he knows how to salute, he knows how to play that character enough. And it's always blown away. And maybe this can kind of lead into how you started Warriors Inc. Is that the need to portray certain military characters, man or woman, in a way that gives a proper recognition to the actual craft and what these men and women actually do for their careers.
Yeah, well, you've hit the heart of the issue, John. I mean, I always felt, and I grew up watching war movies and had I think I'd seen every one there was at some point in time, and the common denominator was so many of them just pissed me off. I mean, I was like any other veteran in the audience. I'd see these guys looking like a bag of rocks, and a beret on their head that looks like a pizza plate. And that started my interest in this. I said, somebody's got to be able to correct that. You see in the credits, you see these guys listed as military advisors. Where are they? Are they asleep in a trailer somewhere? Come on, and then I got to thinking more about it. I was at odds. I'd retired after Beirut in 82, 83. And I got to thinking more about it. I said, it's not just the physical stuff that upsets me. Any veteran who's ever worn the uniform or carried the gear or handled a weapon, he sees those mistakes and it turns him off to the story right away. But I thought there was more to it, John. I thought what's missing here is an understanding on the part of civilians. And you got to remember that us veterans are a really small percentage of the population. What's missing on the part of most people who haven't been where we've been is an understanding of how we think, how we feel, how we react, what's in our mind, what's in our hearts, what's in our guts, because that's a very special thing. And unless you've been there, unless you've made those relationships and understand that dark humor that we share, and unless you've done that, it seems odd to you. It seems these guys are weird. Well, yeah, we are weird in a certain way. But I thought how great it would be if I could find a way to somehow get the actors and the directors and the writers to understand that and to share it in the work that they did. And then maybe I thought we would get in the popular media, which is crucial these days, an understanding to shine some long overdue light and much deserved light on who we are, what we are, how we think, how we act, and why we think that way and why we act that way. So that was the impetus behind my forming of Warriors Incorporated. Now, you have to understand, as I'm sure you do, when I came to Hollywood 30 odd years ago and said, hey, listen, I got this great idea. I'm going to fix everything. You guys are screwed up like Hogan's goat, and I'm going to unscrew you, and here's how I'm going to do it. And by the way, you have to pay me money to do this. Well, I got the typical Hollywood reaction, which is, kid, we've been doing military movies for a decade, and we've done real well, thanks. We've made a lot of money, and you want to come in and tell us there's a better way to build this mousetrap. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Well, I didn't meet much success. And I was, frankly, after about a year in LA, I was about to give it up. I said, I've bitten off more than I can chew here. But I just knew I was right. I knew there was a way to improve this thing. And frankly, the method was what you and I went through as young recruits. I mean, you immerse that, first of all, you PT the crap out of them until they become a blank slate. And then you begin to write the knowledge that you need on that blank slate. It's that simple. But no one had done it. Or if they had done it, they had failed to reach the depths that I wanted to go. And so I was about to give it up. Another one of Captain Dye's brilliant ideas that went swirling down the crapper. And lo and behold, I had learned to read the trade papers, Daily Variety and that sort of thing. And I saw a notice in Daily Variety, it was, as a matter of fact, just a little blurb that said a heretofore relatively unknown writer-director by the name of Oliver Stone was going to do a Vietnam War movie based on his own experience as a combat infantryman in Vietnam. And I said, well, there it is. I mean, if anybody's going to understand this and anybody's going to believe this, I got to get to this guy. So through some contacts and some misbehavior and bribes and various other things that I can't really talk about right now because the statute of limitations may not have run out, I managed to get 5 minutes with Oliver Stone in Hollywood. And I simply pitched it. I pitched it like you would a block of military instruction. I said, listen up, the following attempts. Here's why war movies are screwed up. You know it because you've been there. And if you're going to do this thing right for us Vietnam guys, you've got to do it the right way. These people have to become us as we were at 19, carrying a ruck and a 16 and that sort of thing. And, I looked at him and I wasn't sure really if this guy was buying it or what, but he was. And the upshot is that he said, okay, I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you the actors and I'm going to give you 3 weeks and you have to take them into the jungles of the Philippines and make them live as we lived. And when you bring them down after that 3 weeks, they'd better be you and me when we were 19 or you're fired. And I said, well, that's mission type orders. I think I got it. And he gave me 33 actors, including some who were extremely well known today, but weren't then. Tom Berenger, Willem Dafoe, Forrest Whitaker, Johnny Depp, and so on. And I took them into the mountains of the Philippines, jungle mountains, no prep, no nothing. They had e-tools and they dug their own hole and they lived in that hole. And, I wore them out. And as soon as I got them worn out, 2 hours of sleep a night was a good solid night for them because I kept them up all night on night defensive positions, OPs, LPs, and hit them with my guys. My staff would come in and raise hell with them. We would stage night ambushes, day ambushes, and they were just absolutely knackered, which is exactly what we were, patrolling the jungles in Vietnam, same latitude as the Philippines. And so after that 3 weeks, I brought them down out of the mountains. And they were indeed who Oliver and I were when we were kids in Vietnam. And what had occurred, and this is where I began to refine the Warriors Inc. Captain Dye method, was that I was really after not only their bodies. I had their bodies. They weren't going anywhere and they were going to react exactly the way I wanted them to react. But I was after their minds and their hearts. And so much of what they underwent, they had to rely on each other. The sun did not rise and set on their posteriors. It was about the mission first, the welfare of the unit first, and then the second, and then the welfare of the individual. And that's our life. That's how we live. But they needed to have a physical, practical understanding of that. So they got that. And I think that what happened was every evening before chow, and they ate twice a day or once a day if they'd pissed me off that day. The deal was that I would hold what was called a stand down, and it has now become notorious and famous in the Captain Dye method. And it was simply this. This is a period where we're standing down from training. You can talk to me now as an individual, man to man, and you can ask me any question that's on your mind. And I will not quit talking to you until I've got you to understand that. And it doesn't make any difference how detailed it is. You know, a guy wants to know, well, how does it feel to be hit with morphine if you're wounded? Okay, go after that question until he fully understands it. And when he does, he's got a grasp of that situation that he can bring to the screen. And there were all sorts of questions about these things. I mean, how do you take a dump in the field? Well, I had to demonstrate and explain to them, you know. But all of those things added up to their understanding, their immersion of this thing. And the neat thing was, because we had trained them so well, when they got to telling the story, when they got to portraying their characters, they used every bit of that, even in just moments when they were only in background and that sort of thing. You'd see them punch in the bore of a 16. You'd see them break it down and open it up, pull a bolt, and a bolt carrier group, and you'd see that they knew what they were doing. And that, in large measure, I think, that and a really great story and some really great performances was what really made Platoon, which is the film we were working on, such a dynamic hit. And we brought that little $5 million film home, and lo and behold, it won 4 Academy Awards, Best Picture and Best Director for Oliver. And the upshot was that at those Academy Awards that I attended, in full dress uniform, by the way, Oliver Stone was kind enough to have me stand and be recognized as the guy who did so much to make the film what it was. And as they say, nothing succeeds like success in Hollywood. So at that point, all of those people who were telling me I was nuts were calling me and saying, hey, we got this war picture we want you to work on. And now it's I think 51 movies and TV projects later. You know, it's kind of the method, the way to go. So that's a long dancing around the maypole.
No, it's awesome. It's like, to your point, I remember growing up with my grandparents and parents and watching everything from White Christmas to Kelly's Heroes to all these war movies, learning about, if it wasn't from a history book, I was watching John Wayne on the Iwo Jima or the Battle of the Bulge. And as I got older, Platoon for me, and then obviously Casualties of War, that era, when I was probably old enough to understand kind of that. But when I first see those movies, I noticed a total shift in the fact that it felt like, for me, in a visceral sense, all my senses, these people, I don't even know, I blurred the line between acting and what war really is. Because you read it from a history book, and obviously you understand like what happened, all these combat wars and stuff like that. But when you see it, everything from the way they shifted their weight carrying ruck marches, or their ammunitions, or how they talked after a certain march or something, it seemed like there was a difference. It's kind of cool to actually hear from you that you were part of that change in Hollywood where let's make this as believable as possible. You screaming at someone in a classroom, hey, pay attention, is going to sound and come off a lot differently if you've already marched 5 miles through the swamp. And it's like, I love that little nuances you added to these movies and stuff like that.
Well, to me, that's an Academy Award right there from a fellow veteran who says, look, you did it. I think one of the nicest things that's ever been said about me, and there are just a few, but one of the nicest things that ever been said about me was one reporter in Hollywood said, he did a story on me, and he led it with, let me introduce you to the man who changed the way Hollywood made war movies. And I think, you know, if there's a legacy out there, John, if there's something I could say, well, I'm really proud of that one, as well as some of the great films that I've helped make. I think that's it. I think I did show Hollywood that American audiences, or worldwide audiences for that matter, deserve a look at the real thing. They deserve performances by guys who at least have a more than superficial understanding of what the real thing is. And by doing that, if that's true, and I guess it maybe is, if it's true, then I've done something for my fellow veterans that I'm real proud of.
Is there ever a time in the filming these movies, whether it's either mental or physical, where you have a reaction to a scene or a specific action that happens where it's like it gives you a flashback, maybe not even PTSD, to a incident where you were in Vietnam or something where you saw a loss of life, or I mean, like, is there anything that where it's almost like it's too much for you, or is that part of your job where it's like not everyone has the honor or distinct privilege to defend their country in a military sense, maybe in another way, or maybe there's some people that don't understand the war, but for someone like you to jump in there and kind of create that same reaction to someone like me that watches be like, man, Vietnam would scare the hell out of me. Do you get those same reactions to certain stuff in movies or TV shows?
I do, John. Yeah, especially early on. There would be scenes that we'd be involved in that I would help stage, and they were so close to really tough stuff that I had been through, like in the Tet Offensive of 1968 in Hue City and that sort of thing. Yeah, and they would really jerk me around for a while. And I guess I was harboring some post-traumatic stuff that I didn't really understand and had frankly just ignored because I'm a tough guy. But when I finally realized it, and it came about, I guess, around the time of casualties of war and that sort of thing, when I was really getting into this and doing more and more of it and sort of refining and developing my method of teaching actors and staging combat. It occurred to me, these painful things are going to happen to me because I'm essentially recreating part of my own history, my own legacy. And I had two choices there, John. Give it up, modify it, just to protect my psyche, or say, you know what, your duty isn't done. And you need to deal with this. And the more you deal with it, the more you experience getting it out of your guts. And it's one of the things I've always talked to young men and women who come home from war. Look, there's a lot in the back of your mind, and especially in your guts and in your heart, that's going to bother you for a long time. Now, you got two ways of dealing with that. You can hide it, and you can be a hard ass, and you can just say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with it." Or, and this is what I recommend: find a way to get it out of you. Find a way to talk about it, write about it, think about it in some way that gets that poison in your guts and in your heart out. Get it out. Find somebody, it could be as simple as you talking to me face to face over a beer. And I say, John, this crap has been bothering me about this, that, and the other sort of thing. And I keep having visions of this and visions of that. And it gets worse when I try to teach it to other people. You don't have to say a damn word except sit there with understanding in your eyes because you've seen it.
Right.
And lo and behold, I've coughed some of that out. Some of that is gone. It used to be years ago, it was all about going down to the Legion post or the VFW post. Well, that's kind of fallen out of favor with the generation that spent 14 years in Afghanistan and Iraq before that. But it's still a really, really good way to handle this stuff. I mean, I tell people, look, write. You may not be able to put two coherent words together in an English sentence, but it's not for anybody else. It's for you. Write that crap down, and by doing it, you exercise some demons by doing that. Talk about it. Go on podcasts and say, look, I'm no great shakes at speaking here, but I want to tell you about X, Y, or Z. And lo and behold, you find out that if you face that devil is defeated. And that's probably a whole hell of a lot more than you wanted to know, but that's what I believe.
I've watched other interviews where you've done stuff before where you talk about you weren't good at school, like the math and sciences, but English and writing was your thing. And then obviously, as you get in the military, as a combat correspondent, what was it about writing in a sense that kind of you gravitated towards as opposed to say the math or sciences? Like, what was it specifically, and how unique was it for you to have people in the military at the time be like, you know what, you'd make a really good correspondent?
I think it was. My facility as an observer. Look, I am a kind of a very penetrating observer of things. You can talk to me, and I'll look at your beady ass eyeballs, and pretty well I know what you're saying to me, even if you're not articulating it.
Right.
And I've always had that skill. Couple that with the fact that I'm of an Irish heritage, and I'm that guy that the Irish storyteller. And I'm that guy when we're around a fire, we're eating rations or eating coffee or something. And I'm that guy that can tell you a shaggy dog story and keep you interested for 45 minutes, and there's no point to it. I'm just talking and entertaining. I've always been that guy. And I think that sort of facilitated things. In the business of observing and participating in combat, the interesting thing about that, in extremis, behavior of human beings in extremis. The interesting thing about that is you see the full gamut of human behavior and human emotions, everything from the very absolute best to the absolute worst, and you see it all. And I think I found that fascinating. I said, Jesus, I'm part of a race of human beings that's privileged to be tested in the metal. And then if I'm smart, to observe some of those things and to utilize them both personally and professionally.
When it comes to the Warriors Inc. stuff, when it comes to military tactics, obviously the battles, locations and stuff have changed, but the fundamental of war and combat is I would assume, stayed the same. Obviously technology changes. So when you work on a film, and it's my favorite film of all time, Last of The Mohicans. Yeah. Obviously, you weren't in that war. You weren't in that time. And if you were, you look amazing.
People say I was, but yeah.
So when you work on something like that, how much research goes into before you even step foot there, where it's like, okay, I understand combat, but these are the firearms they had. These are the tactics. This is the location and stuff like that.
Well, absolutely tons of it, John. And that's the reason that most people who try to copy me and sort of get into this business fail so miserably. Because they may be very high speed, low drag, but they don't understand that there's a whole ton of research that has to be done. If you're going to do the 25th century, like Starship Troopers, or you're going to do ancient Greece like Alexander, or somewhere in the middle, you're in 1757, the French and Indian Wars and Last of the Mohicans, you've got to know that stuff. Now, my theory has always been, and I think you kind of alluded to this, that the spirit of a warrior is the same in ancient Greece, in the middle of a 256-man Greek phalanx, as it was with a kid, in the Hindu Kush in 2019. I think the spirit of the warrior is the same. And if I start from there and do my research, things seem to make sense to me. They seem to say, I know why he did that. I know why they did that this way. Because they had the same spirit that I had when I was in Vietnam or Beirut, Lebanon, or Central America, or wherever I was involved. And if you start there as your baseline, your understanding, then so much of what you're researching, that ton of research, which you absolutely have to do, and I mean detailed research. I don't mean reading about, the Gaugamela campaign with Alexander the Great. I mean, what did they wear socks? How did the bow differ if it was a yew bow as opposed to a bone? All of those detailed things. You've got to absorb those, and then you've got to teach those, because you're moving to the spirit of the warrior. The implements change, the tactics change, the weapons change, but the spirit of the warrior doesn't. Now, that's to say, in direct answer to your question, instead of dancing around the maypole here, you got to do a ton of research, and you have to understand that research.
It doesn't help you when you have someone like a Daniel Day-Lewis or a Tom Berenger or a Colin Farrell or a Casper Van Dien. I mean, whatever character you've kind of worked with, that they buy into what you're trying to teach them and show them, because ultimately you're going to make these people look really, really good and believable depending on the characters they portray, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the difference between a good actor and a guy who's just in it to make some money and become famous. A really good actor wants to be an effective storyteller. And those names you mentioned are really good actors because they want to be storytellers, and they will do anything that will assist them in increasing the effectiveness of how they tell that story. I mean, people say to me all the time, well, you're beating the snot out of these guys and making their life miserable, and they're not in hotels and their cell phones and their agents. And don't they ever walk away? The answer is no, they don't. And the reason is, not only do I hold them captive and there's no place for them to go, but that's practical terms. But in a more philosophical, psychological term, they want this knowledge. They want it. They want those insights. And if you can give them the insights and then shape that insight in a context that they can use in their performance, you got them. They'll do anything for you.
Yeah, and it's so cool too, because every time I watch Last of the Mohicans, I picture if Daniel Day-Lewis wasn't as trained or versed or whatever you did for the movie in terms of making this realistic, that movie really isn't successful outside the music and some of the cinematography. It's what he was super believable in a character that outside of that role looks nothing like that part. And I find it really cool that these actors do take what you say and listen, and it'd be so easy to just show up and be like, you know what, where's my paycheck? I'll throw the wig on, make sure the epaulets are ironed or whatever it is, and here I go. But again, for you to have that ability, for the trust, there is trust and the idea of leadership, because they do, not only you've actually lived this life with some of these characters and you put your life on the line with Purple Hearts and you've lived these tales, but so when you look back, is this more of a look at, hey, this guy, he's a leader, and if he's going to lead from the front and do this stuff with us, like, we got to do the best we can ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. And Daniel shadowed me
Awesome.
when I was commanding troops and when I was teaching. And you could even see him pick up certain gestures that I had to warn him about that. I said, listen, some of the stuff I do wouldn't have been done in 1757, so modify it. But he was there all the time, and he was watching me intently teach, watching me intently work with people listen, I stood in front of more British firing lines. I have T-shirts that are just burned with powder burns, because the guys I had to get out front to see exactly how that looked from the front. And of course, they would be firing full charges from Brown Bess and that sort, and I'd catch that. And occasionally a ramrod would come by from the idiot who forgot to replace the ramrod. But Daniel watched all of that. And he was so interested in how I could merely look at somebody and point in this direction. And he'd say, and they know, they just get it. They just go. And I said, yes, it's called leadership, Daniel. And leadership is built on respect. Leadership is built on what knowledge you are imparting. And to be a good leader is a lot like being a good teacher. Look, you remember, I know you do, don't lie to me, all of the instructors that you really liked in school, what little schooling you probably had, all of those were the ones you remembered, and the ones you picked up stuff from, and the ones you emulated were the ones who entertained you.
Right.
They didn't bore you silly. And that drives back to that being part of being a leader is being a teacher and an entertainer. You've got to make what you're trying to impart, the instruction that you're trying to give, you have to make that interesting. And you have to put it in context at all times. The reason I'm teaching you this is because you're going to X, Y, or Z. And you are going to need A, B, and C while you do that. And if you can get to that point without boring them to tears, you have become a teacher and by extension, a leader.
When it comes to the idea of leadership for yourself, obviously there's a great TED Talk out there for anyone obviously going to listen to this. And I suggest you check it out with yourself on it. But you talk about leadership. I guess my question for you, after the last couple of years, especially through the pandemic and stuff, and as you get older, have you felt has your ideas of what you think leadership has changed at all? Has you gotten better, or is old thoughts you've had maybe about leadership kind of changed differently?
Well, look, I don't think leadership ever changes, especially military leadership. it is an inherent quality, and you have it or you don't. Now, it can be built, it can be learned, but there's a certain spark in you that makes you a person who easily does that sort of thing. That's leadership. And it's exemplified nowhere better, in my experience, than in the military, because lives are on the line.
Right.
Now, has leadership changed? Yeah, I suppose it has, in particular with the inclusion of females now, and females becoming leaders and that sort of thing. The all male old boys club, in which you could do certain things in a leadership capacity, you can't do anymore, or you shouldn't do anymore. You can, but you're cutting your effectiveness off if you try to do that. So yes, more the environment in which leadership has to be practiced has changed, but the quality of leadership, the methodology that makes it good, those principles of leadership that I talked about in the TED Talk, for instance, those remain the same. It is threatened at this point by, I think, some incursion. There used to be, see if I can put this right. There used to be a distinct difference between leadership as practiced in the military and leadership management, if you will, that was practiced in industry and manufacturing and that sort of thing. That has gotten, it's slimmed down now. The difference in military leadership and effective corporate management has become sort of enmeshed and intermingled, and that's a bad thing. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. I think it's a disservice. But we have to remember that we Americans, at least, are a military that springs from and is designed to serve the population that we are sworn to defend. So it's a very difficult time right now for military leaders. I often feel kind of bad for the good, solid leaders who are just trying to rock and roll, just trying to teach, just trying to motivate, and they get clobbered with, you know, the PC Nazis and everybody else coming down, and they're pulling the rug out from underneath these wonderful leaders, young corporals and young sergeants, and they can't do what they inherently feel and know they should do because they're leaders. They can't do it at the risk of their career, or at the risk of some sort of silly disciplinary action. And I don't know, John, whether that's going to solve itself or not. I really hope it does. I thought when we first got involved in the wars in the Middle East, and I think early on it did, I thought, well, this will square it away. The civilians will go sit down and let us do what we need to do and lead to what we want to. But the longer it lasted, you know, the more that creep, that encroachment, you know, that mission creep between how civilians do things and how the military feels it should do things. It got narrowed. And I think we had some cowardly leaders at very senior levels, and I use that word advisedly, who refused to stand up and say, hey, get out of my business. I have my orders, and my orders come from a duly elected Congress, from a commander in chief. I know what is required, and I know how to do it. Thank you. Sit down over there. I'll be back when it's done. Unfortunately, we fell into a trap where we couldn't do that. You said we weren't going to get political, but there you go.
No, it's like one of the things too, where it's like, from an outsider looking in now, it's obviously politics have always been involved in war because you just can't go into war just because you feel like it.
Sure.
But the war, it got to for me, it's always felt like I love hearing the troops, the veterans, the people that are actually out there, but the brass now, I feel like, are they in it for the next Fox News or CNN interview or the photo ops or this kind of woke agenda? And like, here I am getting political, but I'm just like, it infuriates me because there's so many good men and women that have served this country and want to serve or are serving right now. It's like, let them do their jobs, because at the end of the day, they are here to serve us and allow us to do a podcast.
Sure. Why
so,
would we subject those people
right
to the 30-second soundbite and
yes
leave them alone? Let them do what they want to do. And that, I think, John, although I'm a huge fan of social media to begin with, because I think it's another form of communication, and any form of communication is good. But it's become too much of a driver. It's become too much of a motivator. I shouldn't be leading troops just to look good for Fox News.
Right.
And if I am, I'm doing the wrong thing. So anyway, that's how I feel.
No, it's growing up. My sisters and I would always not laugh, but like my dad, we'd all be out there during like Memorial Day parades or 4th of July parades or different stuff. My mom has always, since I've got older, walked up to any veteran because she could see a hat or you could tell, thank you for your service. And we'd always sit back and go, Mom, you're embarrassing us. Like, what are you doing? Like, this guy doesn't want to be bothered. Or
you were rotten kids.
Right, for sure. And so as I've gotten older, it's become so awesome when I see my mom do this. And as I've gotten older, I'll be at a concert or whatever, or somewhere out there with someone, and I'll see a hat, whatever branch it is, but hey man, thank you for your service, or buy that veteran a dinner or a coffee or little things like that. And I'm just like, where have we gotten in a society where we should be doing that? And this is the same thing for a nurse or doctor or law enforcement, people that serve others. It's like this isn't, you don't have to buy a dinner, you don't have to buy even a coffee, say thank you. And it's why can't we
look, the doctors, lawyers, soldiers, I mean, that's a calling, not a job.
Right.
Now we've turned it into a job, and I'm interested to hear what you said about thank you for your service. I was trying to be glib, and people would say that all the time to me, and I'd say, you're welcome because you're worth it. And then I thought, boy, are you being a butthole? I mean, you just don't flip them off like that, And so what I tend to say now, or I try to teach people to say is, look, just go up and say, I know we wouldn't be here without you, and walk away. That's better than thank you for your service.
Right.
Because that reaches to us as soldiers. It says, why I did it.
Right.
That's the key.
The reason why I have the freedoms I do is that little head nod. No, it's one of those things too, where it's like, I wish more people were raised that way, like my parents raised us, to be grateful to others who have served.
Sure.
And I have a neighbor across the street, and we're actually in a whiskey club together, and he served in Vietnam. And 10 years ago, when we first met him, he kind of broke down with telling us about the horrors of the Vietnam War and how he came back to the country and was spat on. And it really hit me because you watch movies, obviously, like Born on the 4th of July, or these movies Jarhead that came back, where the media or the filmmaking will portray, you don't know if it's real or not. But when I heard it from him, I go, man, I just thought that was like a newspaper or a headline. He goes, no, we were spat upon, baby killers. And getting to know him, I've realized that to carry that weight that he does, but outside of those moments where he breaks down, you would never know he carries that weight.
But you're helping him by letting him talk about it. See, that's exorcising those demons. The whole thing of baby killers and getting spat on and so on and so forth, it happened, but that's cliche. It's become hyperbole now. The worst thing that happened, and you ask him, you say, Captain Dye wants to know, you ask him, the worst thing was being ignored. If they just didn't have anything to say to you, didn't have any time for you, didn't have any recognition of anything, that to me was always much worse than some clown out there, waving a blood-soaked T-shirt and calling me a baby killer. Hey, listen, that's a clown. And I know a clown when I see a clown. It was the indifference, the almost silent contempt. That's something from the Uniform Code of Military Justice that you should recognize, Article 134, silent contempt. That sort of thing, to me, was always worse. It was worse than anything they could do, anything the commie hippie dope freaks could get out. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
James
silent
Fonda.
contempt.
Yep.
The ignorance of even recognizing this was the worst thing to me.
In terms of go back to kind of Warriors Inc. here before we wrap up. You're there, but who else is on your team? Are these all veterans themselves? Are these weapons experts, armorers, people that? How do you kind of recruit for this?
I always blanch at the term expert, because I don't know that there's an expert in anything, in particular what we do, because so much of it you just pull it out of your butt. You have to. But
right.
Everybody on my team, with one exception, is a veteran of service in some capacity. And more importantly, they're all good students. They understand the Captain Die method. They know why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and what it's about. So, I mean, my executive officer, for instance, and I organize my company like a rifle company. There's no CEO, or there's a CO and an XO and a first sergeant and so on. But all of those guys are veterans. And my XO, I've known him for over 50 years. He and I were young corporals together in Vietnam. And when I started this and it became workable, I drafted him, and kicking and screaming, he came in and he's adopted it and become a terrific teacher himself. And so that's what I look for. I mean, every day I get letters and emails from guys who absolutely have a military resume that'd knock your socks off, that most high speed, low drag schools and so on and so forth. I'm not looking for them. That's very nice, but that puts them in a little box. I want that infantry squad leader who can do everything, and more importantly, who can teach it, who can convey it. So those are the guys I look for. And I've, up at one point, I think we had 15 that we could field at any time. We're able to do 2 movies simultaneously on either side of the world because my guys can handle it. And everybody goes in under the Warriors Incorporated imprimatur. And that's really what people are buying anyway. So yeah, all of my guys are solid veterans, good teachers, good researchers, smart guys.
Does something like the VA have, when someone transitions out of the military, they want to say, do something like Warriors Inc., or maybe the equivalent for artists or painting for movie sets or whatever it is, does the VA, how in tune are they with programs like yourselves that can kind of direct people to these directions?
Well, the VA is pretty fair at pushing people towards something, but they don't have formalized programs for that. What I have done and have helped do in Hollywood is through the International Alliance of Television Stage Employees, IATSE, and through the guilds, the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild, the Screen Actors Guild. I try to push those people toward that because most of those have some sort of veteran preference program where they'll take you, based on your veterans, even if you don't know your butt from your elbow, they'll take you in there. And if you really want to do it, and more importantly, if you show that work ethic that you brought out of the military, they'll train you and they'll put you. I mean, a classic example is my son. He's now in special effects,
Awesome.
Creating blasts and fire and everything. He's a lunatic. And, but that's how I got him in there, and they saw his work ethic, and boom, off he went, and he's doing great with it now.
Is it one of the things I love about when men and women who have served the military that actually are in front of the camera playing actors or whatever, someone like yourself or Adam Driver, or these other people that have served, you can tell about not only their stance and how they present themselves, that they've done something. So for someone like yourself or Adam Driver, when you look at an award show and how they hold themselves accountable out of tabloids, no drama, is it tough for you guys to work in front of the camera now with actors and actresses that are more worried about Star Magazine or, oh, my dog Fifi's sick or my latte's not cold? Like, how hard is it for you guys to kind of separate man, if you were in the foxhole with me, I'd slap you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd have to ask Adam that very question, but I can't tell you this. in general, it just pisses us off.
Right.
You know, here's this Rudy in the rear rank with a rusty rifle who has no idea what the hell he's doing, and he's worried about his latte, and I'm trying to communicate here. So, but you quickly recognize those people,
Right.
and you kind of work around them. And the neat part is, if you just bring what you carry in your heart, you upstage the hell out of them anyway. So it works pretty fair. But I got to tell you, sometimes it's like talking to a ventriloquist dummy. You know, I mean, where are your eyes? Where's your heart? What are you thinking? You know, so yeah, it can get frustrating.
What was it like? Now, obviously, did you have any scenes? I'm a huge fan of Seagal. Like, take out the drama and some of the tabloid fodder. I just love that he perceives himself, especially in film, as someone who's very pro-military, obviously law enforcement. Did you have any scenes with him? Like, what was it like? Because I think that's the first time you portrayed the same character twice, kind of a carryover role.
Yeah.
It was like, would they call you for that? Is that one of those things where it's like, get the band back together? We need you for this stuff?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Look, I didn't have anything. I have a lot of scenes with Tommy Lee Jones, who played in the first one. So Tommy's a good friend. But Stephen, you know, I saw him. I'd see him on the sets, and we would talk and that sort of thing. But I didn't actually have any scenes with him. So I had to kind of, in my mind as an actor, I kind of had to imagine and gin up the relationship that we had.
Because that's what I was wondering, because it seemed very believable. That's why I was wondering. It's almost like you knew, obviously, you've lived that life, talking, dialogue, how to use comms. But for him, obviously, he's acting, but it just seems super believable. Like, I almost pictured you two in the same room, sitting across from each other, because you built that really cool rapport.
Yeah, and I think that really, much to Stephen's credit, you know, he talked to me about a lot of things military, and would listen very carefully. And I think part of his believability was that he picked up on those things. You know, would this happen? Would that happen? How would I think about this? How would I think about that? And I would provide an answer for him. So I think that was helpful to him. And for me, look, you know, how many times your best corporal has just screwed the pooch somewhere, and the CO wants to know, who is this guy, and should I court-martial him, or can I let him off with an Article 15? That's what I was doing. I was protecting my best corporal out there, and I've done that 100 times. And so that's kind of the mindset I was in with Stephen in Under Siege.
Before I let you go here, Captain, like, what kind of projects you got working on? I know the industry is opening back up again after the last couple of years, but I don't know if you could talk about any projects, but obviously it's still exciting for you. Anything cool coming down the pipeline?
Well, I've moved to Texas, South Central Texas, just to get out of the LA rat race, frankly.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm coming up on 78 years old. So, and I still run and lift weights and all that sort of thing, but it's getting harder and harder on me. I'm getting old and ugly. And I'm thinking that, you know, I'm going to reduce how much I do. I just finished 9 months in the UK on a project. I can't tell you a lot about it. I'm under an NDA, but
yep.
But if you saw Band of Brothers and you saw the Pacific,
awesome.
There is a third one, and that'll be out probably in a year or so, because it was so complicated to do. But that one's another World War II project, and I think anybody who's an aviator might really enjoy
awesome.
that. And you know, I still get calls, and they still want me to work on this, and they still want me to work on that. But I'm being really choosy and picky now. I'm saying, you know, I've done that story 100 times, or I'll turn them on to somebody who can help them out. But I'm very picky about the directors and the stories that I do now, because frankly, and I don't want us to sound conceited, but I've pretty well done it, you know. Yes. Unless it's something I haven't done, something that just tickles the hell out of me, then I'll probably pick up on it. But I'm reducing my profile.
If there was a different time or a specific war you could have served in, outside of your era that you did, is which war would that be? Or like, is like the Punic War, Sparta, like what's out there that you wish you could have seen how military tactics and leadership would have evolved during that?
I'll tell you, it probably would be Korea.
Oh, wow.
I think I've just written a book. By the way, I write novels, and there's about 13 of them out there if you want to look them up. Let's see if I've got a copy of one here. Yeah. And now, the plug. This is my new book called Korean Odyssey, and it's a story of a Marine rifle company in Korea. And I've always thought, I mean, the guys who trained me were mostly Korea veterans. And they gave me so much that really ended up saving my life when I got my crucible in Vietnam, that I always thought they were underserved. You know, nobody really understood the Korean War, and nobody really gave a damn. And I have talked to so many Korea veterans who I think there's a light that needs to be shown on them. And I would like to do that.
Awesome. Well, Captain Dye, this has been amazing. Thank you for being the reason why we can actually do this type of thing this day and age. And I wish you all the success and continued creatively outlets and all your stuff, your leadership, everything going on. So thank you again.
You're welcome, John. And the neat thing, the reason I like to do these is because when I talk to another veteran, I can shorthand a lot of stuff and you get it. And that's the points to your success. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk. You might not know this, but before I record an episode, I like to break a sweat. And I do that using the Chop Fit. Over the course of the past year, the Chop Fit has allowed me to lose weight, tone up my body, and feel even more amazing about myself. A feeling that you should all feel about yourselves as well. If you use this code, SpearChop10, you get $10 off your order. Once again, use code SpearChop10 for $10 off your Chop Fit order. It'll change your life. Thank you.